Shiprah and Puah, one of the greatest examples in the entire Bible of civil disobedience, of non-violently resisting an authoritarian. And as we have, many of us participating in the No Kings rally yesterday, we all may be faced in, as these things evolve, with more than just showing up for a protest and more than just a rally, but we may be faced with decisions about what does civil disobedience look like for us? What does it look like for us to resist acts or resist orders from an authoritarian that we are going to refuse to comply with? And we can look to Shiprah and Puah for their example. The context of the story is that the Hebrew people are enslaved in Egypt, and they are thriving in the midst of their slavery. They are continuing to expand as a population. And Pharaoh, the dictator, the authoritarian, is responding to that by increasing their oppression. He first says that they have to produce even more than they were producing before as slaves. And then he gives them less supplies in order to meet their quotas. And when that doesn't work, he does this next thing. He orders that all baby boys are to be killed when they are born. And the midwives are the ones who are tasked with doing that. Shiprah and Puah, who either represent the midwives or maybe they are the only two midwives for all of the Hebrew people, do not just refuse him to his face. They say, okay, sure, and then they go their way. And then we read about what just happened. They don't do it. They don't comply. They're there. They're at the birth. They're assisting with the birth. They're just not doing the thing that Pharaoh told them to do. They're not killing the boys. When Pharaoh calls them in to hold them to account and say, what's going on? Why aren't you doing what I said? They lie to his face, right? These Hebrew women, they're just so vigorous and they're popping these boys out before anybody can get there. And I wonder, as we read that story, if we can look a little bit below the surface of the text and find a valuable lesson for all of us as we face the times ahead, as we seek to resist greater and greater authoritarianism. And that is, I think Shiprah and Puah must have had a really great friendship. I think they must have had a real sense of partnership and solidarity and trust with one another. They had to have, because they had to trust that the other one, that they were both going to give the same story. They had to trust that nobody was going to rat anybody else out. And they had to plan that ahead of time. So they had to have these conversations about getting our story straight. And then on a broader level, all of the Hebrew people had to be in on it too. Nobody could betray the lie. Everybody had to have the story straight. And so the relationships of the people had to be strong. And I wonder, as we face the times ahead and we think about, all these things you have to do to resist the empire and to resist the authoritarian, if we also need to take a step back and make sure our relationships are strong and make sure our friendships are strong and prioritize our relationships and our friendships as we prepare for the times ahead. And I think the church should be a critical place where those relationships can be built. I want to share 3 quotes, and I was looking up these quotes about community and caring for one another in the face of resistance. And I was amazed by the consistency of these 3 authors coming from different perspectives. Adrienne Maree Brown, one of my favorite authors, who wrote Emergent Strategy and wrote Pleasure Activism, a real sort of an organizer and author that appeals to younger generations right now. She writes this: "The strongest resistance is built by small communities of people practicing new ways of being." The strongest resistance is built by small communities of people practicing new ways of being. That sounds like a description of the church. The church should be a community of people coming together and being in relationship with one another and practicing new ways of being. Shane Claiborne is an evangelical, but he's of there are a handful of evangelicals who are really focused on obeying the teachings of Jesus. They are not about the whole other side of evangelicalism, but they're actually taking his words seriously and putting them into practice more than any of us are at the moment. So there's, like Shane Claiborne is living in community with the poor in urban settings and doing that kind of thing. This is what he writes. The kingdom of God is not about going up when we die, but about bringing God's reign down as we live through small acts of love that build community in the ruins of empire. We build community through small acts of love done in the ruins of empire. He wrote that in a book called Irresistible Revolution, which I'm sure must take its title from Audre Lorde. The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. The role of the Christian, I think, is also to make the revolution irresistible. And then Parker Palmer is a Quaker author. The more divided we become, the more we need the practice of community. We need the practice of community to hold us together in the creative tension between our shared humanity and our shared differences. So all of three of those speak to, as we seek to resist what's happening in the world today, community is absolutely essential. And the relationships that we build are absolutely essential. I'll add one more quote that I think really breaks this whole conversation open in a new way. It's by Howard Thurman, the great Black mystic theologian author. He writes, community cannot long feed itself. It can only flourish when always the boundaries are giving way to the coming of others from beyond. Community cannot long feed itself. It can only flourish when always the boundaries are giving way to the coming of others from beyond. And that, even more than anything else that we've heard, is a definition of how the church should function. That if a church is entirely insular, if we have best friends in the church that we've known forever, and that is a closed circle, then our church will die. Any church, and there's lots of churches that do this, that have everybody's been loving each other and being together forever, and you can't, as a new person, break into that church because it's closed. It's a closed circle. Churches that function like that will die. You're either going to grow and you're going to be open to new people coming in and to building new relationships, or we're dying. It's one or the other for a church. Our church, I think, does a great job of being open. I think we maybe need to cultivate more of the friendships and the relationships with the new people as they come in. I think of the church as not a circle, but a broken circle. It's always got an opening. It's always got a place for new people to come in, and hopefully that is a completely non-discriminatory opening, where anybody who's from any background, from any race, from any gender, whatever, even political orientation, is going to be able to come into that, and we're going to make connection, we're going to start building relationships. Now, this is not easy to do. It's hard to make friends as adults. You know, there's that saying, I've heard it in a couple different places, that Jesus' greatest miracle was not that he walked on water or that he fed 5,000 people with a few loaves of bread. It's that as a man in his 30s, he had 12 close friends. It's hard. It's hard today, especially today, to make friendship with adults. And part of that is just natural. When we're children, you get a lot of quantity time to make friends. Go out and play with your friends, we're told. Go out into the neighborhood and play with your friends. Get on a sports team and play with your friends. And even in school, we're together where we make friends. We go to college and we make some of the best friends of our lives. And then you get a job. And then you have family, and maybe you have kids. And all the responsibilities shrink your quantity time for building real friendships with other adults. So that's partly natural. It's partly that in our world today, people move around so much. You know, as we've probably all experienced this, where you have good friends that you depend on and you love very much and you spend time with and you've put the time in, and then they move to a completely other place in the world or the country or the world. And that's so hard, but it happens all the time because we're so mobile. So that's part of the problem. And we also, I think, too much today rely on social media and think that that's what's maintaining our friendships, and it's not. So we think that because we see somebody, it's an extended family or a friend on social media, and we see their pictures of their vacations and their kids, and we feel like, oh, I'm maintaining that friendship. That's not maintaining a friendship. That's just sort of getting little pictures of what's happening from afar. That real friendship requires that time. Real friendship requires making the call or having the conversation or getting together for the coffee or the lunch or the Zoom if it has to be a distance relationship. So friendship is so important, and I think that's what we need to do in the church. So how do we do it? Well, one way is just the effort. So making the effort to find the new people in the church, talk to them, find people maybe that are old people in the church but you've never connected with. Have a good conversation, call them up on the phone. I know that's weird, you gotta text first, right? Text first, is it okay to call you right now? Is this a good time? Can we schedule a time for a phone call? Or go out for coffee, go out for lunch, do the really risky thing and ask somebody to meet you for coffee or something. So you can do that. We can all try harder. But I also think we need to think of ways that are a little artificial. How do we as a church have programs that connect people in a world that seeks to always divide us and always drive us apart? And to that end, we're going to try an experiment. And we're going to call it Advent Connections, okay? And if you sign up for Advent Connections, you're going to be paired up with somebody else who's signed up for Advent Connections, okay? And you can sign up as a single person or as a couple. And you can say, I want to be paired with a single or a couple. You can indicate if you want to do Zoom or phone or face-to-face or some combination of those things. If you have a gender preference of the person you want to be paired with, you can indicate that. And you'll sign up on this pink sheet of paper that's available in the back of the church, or on the weekly email this coming Thursday, there'll be a link to sign up online. And then in December and January, you're asked to connect with your Advent connection once a week. How are we going to find time to have a connection once a week? Maybe it will be just 20 minutes, and we'll even give you things to talk about. Each week, you're going to have topics that you can talk about when you make your connection. Again, it can be by phone, by Zoom, or in person, or some combination of those things. And we're just going to see what happens after 2 months of once a week meeting with somebody and getting to know them better and deepening our relationships with that person. And hopefully then we'll start to think of other ways that we can, as a church, be intentional and careful and planning about having this open circle, this broken circle, that as people come in, there's new ways to build new relationships. We never want to stagnate in the relationships that we have with other human beings. There's always new people to meet. There's always new people to love. And that kind of friendship and that kind of love and those kind of bonds are what is going to lay the foundation for anything we need to do in the future that's going to resist the empire, that's going to resist authoritarianism, because it all starts, as Adrienne Marie Brown says, with small communities of people practicing new ways of being together in the world. Amen.